Mrs. Green Apple, we are continuing our track by track listen through to the self-entitled album with the song Oz. Now, Oz is an interesting one because, as it says, this is the 2017 version. And as far as I'm aware, this is a redone version of a song from that initial EP that was only available in live houses and was given out in that form. Now, I have not listened to the original version, as I think a lot of people haven't. I have been given access to a copy of that initial EP, but I have to check before I put anything online from it because Mrs. Green Apple don't have a copy of that online and I don't want to get copyright strikes. I'm always very careful to follow the copyright rules on this channel because it's one of the reasons why the channel's not monetized. I think it's fair if you're doing reactions, give respect to the copyright holder. So I have not heard the original version of this. I'm putting off listening to that first EP until I can be certain of whether I can share it with you guys. But I am going to listen to this, I'm going to enjoy it, and if I ever do get the opportunity to listen to the original EP with you guys, then I'll certainly be revisiting all of these songs, both in their current and original form. But anyway, here we go. This is Oz. It's coming out of the back of Samama Festival, which was a very cheerful, bright, poppy song. Like I said, probably not the standout song from Mrs. Green Apple, but still one that was really fun at the time anyway. And the energy of this album just generally seems to be pretty high throughout. So let's see what we get with this next one. Let's dive in, have a little listen, and as always, discuss afterwards. Liking that lo-fi intro? Okay, where are we going to go from here? Very poppy again, okay. Okay, we are in the poppy half of the album. Back on the auto-tune as well. Okay. All right, Rebecca Black. Liking the little harpsichord and string uses in there. I'm not sure about that auto-tune, I gotta be honest, I don't think it sounds great. But I'm liking the bouncy kind of poppy feeling. Little side sticks in there. Well, electric side sticks. Okay, that's nice, you get a little bit of brass is building up. The orchestrations and the vocal layers, that's nice. That's a nice dramatic build up there. That key change did not land well. Oh, I'm liking that though. Okay, more key changes. Okay. Yeah. There we go. That was definitely an interesting song. So the song Oz fits in a very interesting place in this album, because obviously I have to think of it both as its own individual song, as a part of this self-entitled album, but also as a song that came before all of this, that's really one of the progenitors of the Mrs. Green Apple sound. Now, I don't know how the original version sounds, so I can only really talk about how this version sort of stood out to me and how it worked. And then I might have to hypothesize a little bit more. In the context of this album, though, I've got to be honest, so far this probably would rank as one of the weakest songs I've heard so far. But it's not without merit. What I think really works for this most of all are kind of the aspects that run through every Mrs. Green Apple song. You know, the fact that it does have some interesting sounds in it. It's playful. You have little harpsichords in there. I did actually like a lot of the things that happened towards the end that I think significantly upped my rating for this song. Like the way that we had that instrumental break where the brass was swelling, the vocal layers were coming in, chopping in there, and strings and everything was building up. That was really great. And it built up to that ending where we had the 4 key changes, well, the 4 keys. I thought that was brilliant. There was some really great stuff towards the end that actually lifted this up quite a lot. And if those things hadn't happened, I would have probably had a much lower ranking for this song. The ending was pretty good. Overall, though, it felt like the things that it did well, as I say, were the little clever ideas like that, which are very Mrs. Green Apple. The melody was quite interesting. It had little harpsichords and strings in there. And it was generally just a song that clearly was supposed to be taken very lightly. For me, the problem is that it also kind of felt in a way, and this is where it's a bit weird to comment on this, given that it's obviously one of the earliest Mrs. Green Apple songs, at least in its original concept. But this version, it almost felt like a pastiche of the album. It almost felt like a pastiche of everything we know from Mrs. Green Apple. It just didn't quite have, it was a little bit lacking in nuance. The bass line in this was pretty not kind of there. It felt almost a little bit arbitrary. I do think that the use of auto-tune in this, I am not completely against auto-tune. I think it can be used very creatively. I think it sounded pretty awful in here, if I'm honest with you. It was interesting because we talked earlier about just only 2 songs earlier we had Ubu. And Ubu, I pointed out, was actually a really cool use of auto-tune. And I said at the time, one of the things that would most colour my opinion of Ubu is if it was really an outlier on the album, because that makes it all the more special. Then having Oz 2 tracks later, also doing the auto-tune thing, I feel like it kind of detracts a little bit from both of them, actually. Whereas Ubu felt like the auto-tune worked, because it was a very digital sounding song, in Oz, it just doesn't feel like it works. And I was talking as well about how that final bit where it steps up and you have the key changes, I really liked that. Well, the very first one of those key changes landed with a really awkward auto-tune wobble that just sounded bad. So for me, it was like, the song felt like a wobbly demo, which is weird because if the original version sounds like a wobbly demo, that's fine because back when that was made, it kind of was a demo. But this is a second take that they've chosen to do of an earlier song. So I don't know why it sounds kind of underbaked, half-cooked, just not there. You would think that if you were taking a second bite at a song, it would be really good. And especially on an album like this, where I must say, so far, the one thing that you can't question is that this album is full of very accomplished sounding songs. And of course, we've been covering their earlier albums with so many of their earlier albums. Again, the shocking thing is how accomplished, how together their sound is. It's very rare that you can hear anything where it sounds like just a bad choice. This one, though, I've got to be honest, I am very intrigued to go and check out the original and share it with you guys. Because I really want to know, Yeah, in my head, I have to assume that maybe this isn't, when I say 2017 version, do they mean this is actually the original recording? They've just remastered it or something? Because if this was a genuine ground up rebuild, it just, yeah, it just, I don't know. There's just not much here. And as I say, it feels like it's a pastiche of the much better songs that have occurred before it. It kind of does things that all the other songs have done better, and it just feels wobbly and not quite there. Is it a bad song? No. No. Again, it has enough of those Mrs. Green Apple qualities in it that you could never call this bad. It just clicks, it clicks in the kind of melody way, that's all fine. But it feels much more empty, much more like there's a lot of room for things to happen where nothing happens. The bass line feels like it's just not particularly there. The details are nice, but they're too infrequent. The clever ideas are mostly at the end. And the auto-tune just sounds really horrible. Just it doesn't work. And the funny thing is, I covered the recent Matoki Omori song that he had, which was the solo song that, again, I keep on forgetting the name, one where he's walking down the street, and that one had auto-tune in it. Really nicely used, worked in there because it kind of gave you this sort of eerie sense that worked with the song. As I say, Ubu had it, worked in that, but this one, it doesn't work at all. So I would really like to know. I feel like I'm going to get a lot more context if I go back and check the original. But this is one of those songs where if I get the feeling that if I put on this album and listen through to it again, that would be a skipper. That would be a song that I would skip, pretty sure. Not because it's terrible, just because it just doesn't feel up to the quality of everything I've heard thus far on the album, if I'm honest with you. It's the classic example of a filler track, a 5 out of 10. It doesn't really do much wrong, but doesn't do much right either kind of song. I always told you guys, I will be honest on this. I think there's only been one other song before on my Mrs. Green Apple reviews where I was like, I don't know, that one just doesn't quite work. Well, now there's two. Yeah, don't hate it, but I definitely wouldn't come back to listen to it again. Really weird that. I am now doubly intrigued to go back and check out the original album. But as always, these are my thoughts. Yeah. Oh, I really want to go back and check out that initial EP now. But as always, get in the comments, tell me what you think. This was okay. It was okay, but it just, and always when you're talking about a band like Mrs. Green Apple, the bar is set higher. If this was coming from some band who just arrived and this was their first ever song on the scene, I'd be going, oh, the things you did right were really good, and just there's a couple of things, maybe they could tweak that, but like so much about this is really good. But this is from Mrs. Green Apple, which means for all the praise I give them, it also means that the bar is set high. So when you put out something like this, it's just like, I can't glaze over that. That just didn't feel like it was up to the quality of the rest of the album. But Just a Friend is next. Hopefully Just a Friend will redeem us. I've got to be honest, I was saying when we did this album, I was saying about so many of the other Mrs. Green Apple albums, there seems to be a propensity towards starting a little bit on a slightly more wobbly foot, and then the albums just seem to get better and better as they go. This one feels like, are we going the opposite way? It's like we started so strong. Like the last song, Some of My Festival, was really fun. Really enjoyed it. But I did say at the time, it was like really fun, but it just kind of like felt like they got other songs like that are better. Now we had one that feels a little bit like it was a misstep, kind of a skipper. We've got 4 songs left. I'm intrigued. So anyway, as always, I hope you're following along with this journey, because I'll give you my honest takes on all of it. And let's see, how does this album wrap up? Until we get there, though, get in the comments, tell me what you think, and until I hopefully see you very soon for the next one of these. For now, ciao, ciao.